Welcome to the e-lesson for Module 1, and let's dive right into these objectives. So our first one is going to be define gaming. Then we're going to be defining gamification, and finally we're going to be describing the uses of gaming and gamification in an educational setting. I'm going to be incorporating a lot of the material from the reading and videos, and I'll mention it when appropriate, but you also need to make sure you've gone through and done the reading and watch the videos for this week's module. Let's start off with a game. We need a good workable definition for a game. Now, your reading mentions a good bit of different aspects of a game, so I'm going to be pulling out the main points in all of the reading assignments and combining them for the necessary parts. Also, understand that we're not going to be distinguishing between video games, board games, and sports. When we talk about a game, we're just going to be talking about any of these things. So we're going to be looking at all of the aspects that those have in common. Now, the first thing that you think of with games, they have to contain rules. You have to have a way to go through and play a game where you know exactly what you can do and what's allowed, and also what is not allowed. So that's an essential component for a game. You also have to have a goal. There has to be a reason you're playing. Now you could say, well, I'm playing so that I can have fun. Well, but it's not very fun if you're not really sure what you're even supposed to be doing. So you have to have a clear-cut goal within a game. And then finally, some competition. There needs to be a winner or a loser in order for it to be a game. A true game has competition. Now, this might take the form of a computer versus a person, but at any rate, there will be a winner and there will be a loser in any game. Those three things are essential components to every single game. Let's move into some other game elements that we also see. One thing that a lot of games include are experience points or progress, and the video touched on it quite a bit so that we can understand this concept. Experience points or progress. We gain experience points as we complete different tasks throughout the game. So as we progress through the game, we see our experience points go up, and essentially we are rewarded. Even if it's meaningless experience points, we're still rewarded by progressing in the game, just simply by progressing. And by progressing, that means we're getting closer to meeting the goal of the game or winning the game. Now, the psychology behind this, and it's mentioned in the video on gaming, is that, actually on gamification, is that psychologically it makes a lot more sense to go up with progress and start at 0 as opposed to starting with as many points as you could possibly get and working your way down. Because really at one point you're focused on, I can't make any mistakes, and frustrated because you've made mistakes and losing points. And the other way, you're not focused on making mistakes, you're focused on actually making the correct behavior, which is a very good possibility whenever you're going through and playing a game. Now, we also have to look at digital badges. Digital badges are those things that you can collect through completing maybe sub-objectives in a game. And then we have collaboration. Collaboration is something important within many popular games today, because you not only want to interact with the product, with the game, but you want to interact with other people. You want to learn from other people. And a lot of these games are including collaboration in kind of a social environment so that people can get support from their friends. In fact, games are being built now that include collaboration, where you have to collaborate, not just sitting there interacting with a screen. And then feedback. Instantaneous feedback is something that gaming has done for a long time and done very well. Now, that doesn't mean that every game gives you instantaneous feedback, but most of it has to be pretty instant, otherwise you don't progress through the game. You make decisions and you get feedback. Either it was a good decision or it was a bad decision, but you get that feedback. Let's transition into gamification. And it's going to be a really simple definition. Gamification is just implementing game elements within content. So we're not talking about a whole game, we're talking about bits and pieces of a game into your teaching or into content. It may look like this, where you're actually playing a game in class based around your content. Or it might simply look like this, to where students are completing what would look like traditional work, but you've put in either rules, competition, something in there that takes it into a gamification realm. So although the definition is a pretty simple definition, when we look at it in practice, it's actually a lot harder to identify in practice unless you know what elements the teacher is including. I want to go through some of these gaming elements. Now, I mentioned this with games, but we're looking at competition, rules, goals, experience points of progress, collaboration, and feedback. And whenever we include those into content, it's called gamification. We're not talking about including all of these, but let's say we take 1 to 2 of these gaming elements and include them into the content we're teaching, and it becomes gamified content. Now, I know I made it sound pretty easy, like we can just take competition and inject it in there, and then that's called gamification. But it really is kind of that simple with taking something and injecting it. Now, your desired outcome might be something that you have to work with, because I truly don't believe you can just take competition, put it in there, and students will be competitive. You have to build that. You have to build in something to make it competitive. Also, the same thing with collaboration. Things have to be built for collaboration. Just because students are talking about an assignment doesn't mean they're collaborating to work towards a constant goal. Although I will say, for experience points and progress, the gamification video really did hit the nail on the head. That's a pretty simple way to change your grading, where you assign points based on correct answers, not taking away points based on incorrect answers. So everybody starts out at 0 and builds up. It's just a different mindset of looking at that. Now, we have this kind of idea of gamification. I know it's a pretty quick overview of gamification. Let's look at some of the educational uses. We've all seen probably something like this, that we have Jeopardy in the classroom, where we're using the classroom. It's a trivia game, ask questions, students give answers to the questions and get points based on correct answers. So this is a type of gamification. And yes, it looks like a game within class. Now, you could say, well, this is an educational game, it's not gamification. I mean, yes, it is an educational game, but it also falls in that realm of gamification. And also, depending on how it's used, could make it more of a game or more gamification. And then we have this. Now, this might be what I would consider gamification, because you might not have competition in this. It looks like it's something for the students to complete, and all they're doing is going through and solving these math problems as quickly as possible, because they have to find the one that has a value of 12. This would be a very good way to go through and motivate students to do these problems. Now, you might have that one student that can just easily figure it out, but at the same time, this is still an example of gamified content. And then we have this, where it looks like they're playing hangman on the board, but still, students are actually in a class competition trying to win and really wanting to give the answer. Now, you can't tell exactly what is being asked or what they're supposed to be completing, but this is another example of gamification in the classroom. So please read through this week's reading assignments and look at those videos, because it really does clear up those educational uses and starts giving you some ideas. And just going back to these gaming elements, there's one thing that they all have in common when we talk about gamified content and the end result, and it's all about motivation. The whole point of using gamified content is to motivate students. I mean, imagine if you gave students some true-false questions to answer on paper, where they just had to go through and list true or false, or even multiple choice, versus giving that same assignment into a gaming format. The motivation to do the gaming format is completely different than doing the traditional multiple choice questions. So it's really just coming down to a different mindset and this whole idea of gamified content. Now, these additional resources, I would take a look at them because they're not very lengthy this week. We've got gamification infographic, which that infographic is very, very good for simplifying gamification. And then also game mechanics, looking at the different mechanics within gaming. So check those out. I think they'll be really good for you to look at. They're not required, but I do think that you'll find some value of looking through them. Now the next steps. So in this module, you need to complete the discussion. I would go in there pretty quickly, go through, complete the discussion, and just make sure you respond to that discussion question and add depth to the discussion, because I know you have a lot you can offer in your aspect of gamification. You'll also need to complete the assignment, and this assignment really focuses on how you can use gamification in your classroom. You'll be asked to come up with a topic or a unit of study that you want to do or think that you know a good enough information about where you can complete the rest of the assignments in the course. So thoughtfully go through that and pick out a topic that you can use for the gamification parts of this course. And then you'll need to complete a reflection, and the reflection, it really just goes back and tries to solidify that information with gaming and gamification in the classroom, and I want to know your thoughts on it. So make sure you go through, complete those next steps, and I hope you enjoy working through this module.